She was 20 and homeless, no family, no place to go. Just $10 left, and she spent it on a hidden cave for $10 along a forgotten coastline. People thought she was crazy. A worthless cave. Dangerous. Empty. But what they didn't know, that hidden cave for $10 was hiding something no one had seen in over 100 years, a discovery that would change her life forever. Before we continue, if stories like this mean something to you, subscribe. At just 20 years old, Harper Collins was already at the edge of survival and one step away from disappearing completely. No home, no safety net, no one coming to save her. The world had moved on without her, leaving her behind with nothing but exhaustion and a single wrinkled $10 bill. The nights were the worst. Freezing winds tore through the jagged cliffs of Northern California, cutting through her thin jacket as she curled up near abandoned structures just to stay alive. Hunger gnawed at her. Fear followed her, and time was running out. Then, something strange, almost unbelievable, appeared on a dusty public library screen. A listing no one cared about. A forgotten coastal cave, sealed behind rusted iron gates, hidden from the world for decades. Price $10. It sounded insane, dangerous, possibly deadly. But Harper didn't see a cave. She saw her last chance. With trembling hands and a racing heart, she made a decision that most people would never dare to make. She spent everything she had on something no one else wanted. Because deep down, she felt it. If she walked away now, she might never know what was waiting for her in the darkness. And what she was about to find would change everything. The next morning, the sky was a dull gray, heavy with the promise of another storm rolling in from the Pacific. Harper Collins stood at the edge of the cliff, staring at the place she had just gambled her entire life on. From a distance, the cave didn't look like salvation, it looked like a warning. Jagged rocks, violent waves crashing below, and at the center of it all, barely visible beneath years of neglect, stood a rusted iron gate, sealed shut like it was hiding something the world had chosen to forget. For a moment, doubt crept in. What have I done? But the cold wind biting into her skin quickly reminded her there was no going back, no backup plan, no second chance. This wasn't just a risky decision anymore. This was survival. Harper tightened her grip on the small crowbar she had scavenged from a nearby construction site and began forcing her way through the dense overgrowth. Thick vines clawed at her arms like they didn't want her there. Thorny bushes tore at her jeans, leaving thin streaks of blood across her legs. Every step forward felt like a battle, as if nature itself was testing whether she truly belonged. Hours passed. Her hands trembled from exhaustion. Dirt and sweat clung to her skin, but slowly, painfully, the hidden entrance began to reveal itself. The iron gate was larger than she expected, massive, corroded, and chained shut with a heavy lock that had clearly not been touched in decades. Harper stepped closer, her breath uneven. This was it. Everything she had left in the world led to this moment. She slid the crowbar into the chain and pulled. Nothing. The metal groaned, but didn't give. She tried again, harder this time. Her arms screamed in protest, her muscles burning as desperation took over. Come on, she muttered under her breath, her voice shaking. Again, and then, crack. The sound echoed against the cliffs, sharp and final. The chain snapped loose, and the gate creaked open just enough to reveal a narrow gap into complete darkness. Harper froze. A wave of cold, damp air rushed out from inside the cave, brushing against her face like a whisper from something ancient, something that had been waiting. For a split second, fear rooted her in place. Because now it was real. There was no listing, no screen, no imagination, just her, and whatever was waiting beyond that darkness. Most people would have turned back. Harper stepped forward. The moment she crossed the threshold, the sound of the crashing waves outside faded, replaced by an eerie stillness. The air inside was cooler, heavier, but strangely calm, almost protective. She paused, letting her eyes adjust, her heartbeat loud in her ears. This didn't feel like the outside world anymore. It felt different, safer, in a way she couldn't explain. She took another step, then another. The ground beneath her feet was uneven but solid. The walls, carved naturally from limestone, stretched high above her, creating a space far larger than she had imagined. Drops of water echoed softly in the distance, forming a slow, rhythmic pulse that filled the silence. For the first time in weeks, Harper exhaled. Not the shallow, anxious breaths she had grown used to, but a deep, steady breath that reached all the way down into her chest. She wasn't outside anymore. She wasn't exposed. She wasn't running. This place, dark, cold, forgotten, was the first place that didn't feel like it was trying to push her away. And that realization hit her harder than anything else. Tears welled in her eyes, catching her off guard. She quickly wiped them away, almost embarrassed, even though no one was there to see. "This is mine," she whispered. The words felt unreal, fragile, but also powerful. She set her small bag down near the entrance and looked around again, this time with different eyes. Not as a stranger, but as someone who had just claimed something the world had abandoned. There was work to do, so much work. The ground was littered with debris, old driftwood, tangled seaweed, broken stones. The air smelled faintly of salt and age, but beneath all that, there was potential. Real, undeniable potential. Harper grabbed a piece of wood and began clearing a small area, pushing aside years, maybe decades of neglect. Each movement was slow, deliberate, painful. But with every piece she removed, something inside her shifted. This wasn't just cleaning. This was rebuilding, reclaiming, fighting back. Time blurred as she worked, completely losing track of hours. Outside, the storm finally broke, rain hammering against the cliffs. But inside the cave, it was quiet, protected, safe. For the first time since losing everything, Harper had shelter. But more importantly, she had a reason to keep going. And as she stood there, breathless, surrounded by the beginnings of something new, she couldn't shake the feeling that this cave wasn't just a place to survive. It was hiding something, something no one else had ever seen, something that had been waiting, just for her. By the time night fell, Harper Collins had carved out a small corner of the cave she could finally call her own. A rough patch of cleared ground, a makeshift bed of driftwood and worn fabric. It wasn't much, but it was more than she'd had in weeks. And yet, something didn't feel complete. As she sat there in the dim glow of a flickering flashlight, her eyes kept drifting deeper into the cave toward a narrow passage she hadn't explored yet. It stretched into darkness, swallowing the light just a few feet in. Most people would have stopped, but Harper wasn't most people anymore. There was a quiet pull, something she couldn't explain, curiosity instinct, or something else entirely. She grabbed her flashlight, hesitated for only a second, then stood up. "Just a quick look," she whispered to herself, her voice echoing faintly against the stone walls. Step by step, she moved deeper into the cave. The air grew cooler, thicker. Each breath felt heavier, like she was stepping into a place untouched by time. The soft, dripping sound from earlier grew louder now, echoing from unseen corners. Then suddenly, the ground beneath her foot shifted. Harper froze. Her heart slammed against her chest as she quickly steadied herself, shining the flashlight downward. The beam revealed a sharp drop just inches ahead, a natural ledge where the cave floor suddenly dipped into a lower chamber. "If I hadn't seen that," she murmured, her voice trembling. "One wrong step, and everything would have ended right there." Carefully, she crouched down and angled the light into the space below. At first, she saw nothing but shadows. Then, something unnatural caught her eye. Straight lines, sharp edges, not stone, not random debris. Her breath hitched. "Wait, what is that?" With cautious movements, Harper found a safer way down, gripping the rough rock as she lowered herself into the hidden chamber. The moment her feet touched the ground, a strange silence wrapped around her, as if this part of the cave had been sealed off from the world entirely. She raised the flashlight again, and this time she saw it clearly. Her entire body went still. Stacked neatly against the far wall were wooden crates, not one, not two, but dozens, perfectly aligned, undisturbed, waiting. A chill ran down her spine. No way. This didn't make sense. Nothing about this made sense, while this cave was supposed to be abandoned, forgotten, worthless. So why would something like this be here? And more importantly, who put it here? Harper took a slow step forward, her boots echoing softly in the chamber. The beam of light swept across the crates, revealing their aged surfaces, darkened wood, reinforced corners, metal brackets slightly tarnished with time. But what truly unsettled her was how intact they were. No signs of decay, no collapse, no disturbance. It was as if time itself had chosen to leave them untouched. Her pulse quickened. This wasn't just strange. This was impossible. She reached out slowly, her fingers hovering over the nearest crate before finally making contact. The wood was cold, solid, real, not a hallucination, not a dream. This was actually here, and somehow it had been waiting all this time. For who? She whispered. The question lingered in the air, unanswered. Her hands trembled as she examined the crate more closely. There were markings faded, almost invisible but definitely there. Symbols, numbers. She couldn't tell in the weak light. Every instinct inside her screamed two things at once: run, or open it. Her jaw tightened. She had spent weeks surviving fear, living in it, running from it. Not anymore. Not tonight. With a deep breath, Harper searched the ground and found a jagged piece of metal. She wedged it under the lid of the nearest crate and pushed. At first, nothing. Then, a faint creak. The sound echoed through the chamber like something awakening after a long, silent sleep. Harper's heart pounded. Okay. She pushed harder. The wood groaned louder this time, resisting, then slowly beginning to give way. Dust shifted. Tiny particles danced in the beam of her flashlight. And then, crack. The seal broke. Harper froze. For a split second, she didn't move, didn't breathe, because deep down, she knew this was the moment. The moment everything would change. Slowly, carefully, she lifted the lid. The flashlight beam slipped inside the crate, and whatever was hidden in that darkness was about to rewrite her entire life. For a moment, Harper Collins couldn't move. The beam of her flashlight trembled in her hand as it illuminated the inside of the crate, and what she saw made her breath catch so sharply it almost hurt. Inside, neatly arranged, as if they had just been placed there yesterday, were maritime instruments. Brass, polished, intricate, untouched by time. "No, this isn't real," she whispered, her voice barely audible. She reached in slowly, her fingers brushing against the cold surface of a brass compass. It was heavier than she expected, solid, perfectly balanced. When she tilted it slightly, the needle inside still moved, smooth and precise. Working, after all these years. It was still working. Her heart began to race. This wasn't junk. This wasn't debris. This was something else entirely. One by one. She carefully lifted the items out of the crate, a sextant with delicate engravings, navigation charts sealed in protective casing, instruments she had only ever seen in museums or history books. Each piece looked preserved, almost protected, like the cave itself had been guarding them. Harper's mind struggled to catch up. How is this even possible? Her flashlight flickered slightly as she turned her attention to the markings inside the crate. There, faint but unmistakable, were serial numbers etched into the metal, along with a name. A ship's name. Her pulse skipped. She didn't recognize it, but something about it felt important, heavy, like she had just stumbled into a story far bigger than her own. Shaking. She pulled out her phone. No signal. Of course. But she didn't need the internet to understand one thing. This wasn't random. This wasn't just a cave anymore. This was a time capsule. And somehow, she had just opened it. Her breathing grew uneven as the reality began to settle in. These crates weren't scattered. They weren't abandoned carelessly. They had been placed here. Carefully. Intentionally. Hidden. Protected from the outside world. Waiting. Her gaze slowly lifted to the other crates stacked in the shadows. Dozens of them. Her chest tightened. "If one looks like this," she murmured, "then what's in the others?" The question sent a surge of adrenaline through her body. Fear mixed with something else. Excitement. Hope. Possibility. For the first time since stepping into the cave, Harper stopped thinking like someone trying to survive, and started thinking like someone who had just found something valuable. Something life-changing. She quickly opened another crate this time with less hesitation. Inside, more instruments, even more refined. Some wrapped in oilcloth. Others secured in custom-fitted compartments. Everything was organized with precision, like it had been prepared for a journey that never happened, or one that never returned. Her thoughts began racing. A ship. A missing shipment. A crew that never made it back. The pieces started connecting in her mind, forming a story she couldn't fully see yet but could feel. "This belonged to someone," she said softly. "Someone who never came back for it." A strange silence followed. Not empty. Heavy. Respectful. Harper slowly sat back on her heels, staring at the open crate in front of her. Just hours ago, she had been a homeless girl with nothing but desperation keeping her alive. Now, she was sitting in front of something that could rewrite her entire future. Her hands shook, not from fear this time, but from the weight of realization. This cave was never worthless. It was never forgotten. It was hidden. And somehow, against all odds, she was the one who found it. Tears filled her eyes again, but this time, they didn't come from pain. They came from something she hadn't felt in a long time. Relief. Disbelief. Gratitude. "I'm not done," she whispered. For the first time, those words felt true. Not just something to hold on to, but something real. Something solid. She looked around the chamber again, but now everything felt different. The darkness didn't feel threatening anymore. It felt full of secrets, waiting to be uncovered. Waiting for her? Harper stood up slowly, clutching the brass compass in her hand. Its needle steadied, pointing forward, firm, unwavering. Just like her. Because in that moment, everything shifted. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She wasn't just hiding from the world. She had stepped into something bigger, something meaningful. And deep down, she knew. This discovery wasn't just going to change her situation. It was going to change who she was. From invisible to someone with a story the world would never ignore. And this was only the beginning. Harper Collins didn't sleep that night. Not because she was afraid anymore, but because her mind refused to slow down. She sat near the entrance of the cave. The faint glow of early dawn creeping in from the horizon. While the brass compass rested tightly in her hands, every few seconds, she glanced back toward the hidden chamber, toward the crates that had just rewritten everything she thought she knew about her life. This can't just be nothing, she whispered, because deep down she already knew the truth. It wasn't nothing. It was everything. By sunrise, Harper made a decision. She needed answers. Real ones. Clutching a few of the smaller items she had carefully wrapped in cloth, she made her way back toward the nearest town, a long, exhausting walk that once felt meaningless, but now carried a sense of urgency she had never felt before. Every step echoed with a single thought. What if this changes everything? When she finally reached a small coastal antique shop tucked between weathered buildings, she hesitated at the door. What if she was wrong? What if it was all worthless after all? But then she remembered the weight of the compass in her hand, the flawless movement of its needle, the untouched condition of everything she had seen. No, this was real. She pushed the door open. A small bell rang overhead. Behind the counter stood an older man, quiet, observant, the kind of person who had spent a lifetime studying objects most people overlooked. His eyes immediately shifted to Harper, then down to the cloth bundle she carried. "You need something appraised?" he asked calmly. Harper swallowed. I think so." Her hands trembled slightly as she unwrapped the items on the counter. The brass compass. A sextant. A small engraved instrument she didn't even recognize. For a moment, the man said nothing. He simply stared. Then his entire expression changed. He leaned in closer, slowly, carefully, like he was afraid to even breathe too hard. "Where did you get these?" he asked, his voice suddenly sharper. Harper's heart skipped. "I found them," she replied, her voice cautious. The man didn't respond immediately. Instead, he reached for a magnifying glass, examining the engravings, the serial numbers, the craftsmanship. His hands, steady at first, began to tremble slightly. "This isn't possible," he murmured. Harper felt her pulse rise. "What do you mean?" He looked up at her, eyes filled with disbelief. "These instruments, they're over 100 years old. Early 1900s, maybe even older. And the condition..." He shook his head. "They shouldn't exist like this. Not outside of a museum." The words hit her like a wave. 100 years. Museum level. Her breathing grew shallow. "And this name," the man continued, pointing at the faint engraving. "This belongs to a vessel that disappeared off the Pacific coast decades ago. No wreckage was ever found. No cargo recovered. Silence filled the room." Harper's mind went blank for a second. A missing ship, lost cargo, and she had just found it. "How much is it worth?" she asked quietly. The man exhaled slowly, still staring at the items like they might vanish if he looked away. "Individually, thousands, maybe more." He paused. "But if what you're telling me is true, if there's more of this..." His eyes locked onto hers. "You're not sitting on a small find." Harper's chest tightened. "You're sitting on a fortune." The word echoed in her head. Fortune? Just days ago, she had nothing, not even a place to sleep. And now, this, it didn't feel real. It couldn't be real. But the weight of the moment pressed in from all sides, undeniable. "What should I do?" she asked, her voice barely steady. The man leaned back, studying her more carefully now, not just as a customer, but as someone standing at the edge of something life-altering. "You need to document everything, protect it, and whatever you do." He paused. "Don't tell the wrong people too soon." A chill ran down her spine. Because suddenly, this wasn't just opportunity anymore. It was risk, responsibility, power. Harper carefully gathered the items, wrapping them again with new awareness like they weren't just objects anymore, but pieces of something far bigger. As she stepped out of the shop, the world felt different. Brighter, louder, full of possibility, but also full of unknowns. She looked down at her hands, the same hands that had been empty just days ago. Now, they held the beginning of something extraordinary. The cave wasn't just a shelter anymore. It wasn't just a discovery. It was a doorway to a life she had never imagined, to a future that once felt impossible. And as Harper turned back toward the cliffs, toward the place everyone else had ignored, she realized something that sent a quiet shiver through her entire body. The world had walked past that cave for decades and missed everything, but she didn't. And now, there was no turning back. When Harper Collins returned to the cave that evening, everything felt different. Not the cliffs, not the crashing waves, not even the cold wind that still howled across the coastline. What had changed was her... She paused at the rusted gate, her hand resting lightly against the metal. Just days ago, she had stood here as someone desperate, someone with nothing left to lose. Now, she stood there as someone who had something to protect, something valuable, something powerful. As she stepped inside, the cave no longer felt like a place of refuge alone. It felt like responsibility. Every shadow, every echo, every hidden corner now carried weight, because she knew what was buried within those walls. And more importantly, she knew what it could become. Harper walked deeper into the cave, her khutuwat steady, her breathing calm. When she reached the hidden chamber again, she didn't hesitate this time. She didn't freeze. She didn't question herself. She stepped forward like someone who belonged there. Her eyes scanned the crates, not with shock anymore, but with focus. "This is real," she said quietly, "and I'm not losing it." That was the moment everything shifted. She wasn't reacting anymore. She was deciding. Over the next few days, Harper transformed into someone she barely recognized. The girl who once wandered aimlessly from place to place now woke up with purpose. She created a system. Each crate was carefully documented, sketched by hand, labeled, observed. She noted every marking, every engraving, every detail she could find. Without internet, without resources, without help, she relied on instinct, memory, and determination. And it worked. Slowly, patterns began to emerge. Symbols repeated, dates aligned. Serial numbers followed sequences. This wasn't random cargo. This was an organized shipment, a mission that had been interrupted, and now she was the one piecing it back together. But growth didn't come without fear. At night, when the cave fell silent, her thoughts would creep in. What if someone else finds out? What if this gets taken from me? What if I lose everything, again? The fear was real. But this time, she didn't run from it. She used it. Instead of hiding, Harper became more careful, more strategic. She reinforced the entrance, disguising the path leading to the gate with natural debris. She stopped carrying multiple items at once. She trusted fewer people. She was learning, adapting, becoming stronger, and with every passing day, her confidence grew. Not because of the treasure, but because of what she was proving to herself, that she could survive, that she could think, that she could build something out of nothing. One afternoon, as sunlight briefly reached the cave's entrance, Harper stood there holding the brass compass again. The same one that had first shaken her world. She stared at it for a long moment, then smiled just slightly. "Funny," she murmured. "This whole time, I thought I was lost." She looked back into the cave. But maybe I was just being led here. That realization settled deep within her, because for the first time in her life, Harper didn't feel like she was chasing survival anymore. She felt like she was building a future. The cave became more than shelter. It became a project, a mission, a foundation. She cleared larger sections, creating defined spaces, one area for rest, one for storage, one for studying the artifacts. The chaos slowly turned into structure, and that structure turned into control. Harper wasn't at the mercy of the world anymore. She was shaping her own. Days turned into weeks, and the transformation became undeniable. Her posture changed, her voice steadied, her eyes, once filled with fear, now held clarity. She wasn't invisible anymore, even if no one else could see it yet. She could feel it, deep in her chest, a quiet strength, unshakable, and perhaps the most powerful change of all. She stopped seeing herself as the girl who lost everything, and started seeing herself as the woman who found something no one else could. Something hidden, something valuable, something that required courage, not luck, because not everyone would have walked into that cave. Not everyone would have opened that crate. And not everyone would have had the strength to carry what came after. But Harper did, and as she stood there, surrounded by history, by mystery, by opportunity, she understood something that changed her forever. This wasn't just about what she had found. It was about who she had become, because she found it. Months passed, but for Harper Collins, time no longer felt like something she was trying to survive. It became something she was finally building with. The cave that once echoed with emptiness had transformed into something almost unrecognizable. Soft, warm lighting now traced along the natural curves of the limestone walls. Carefully restored wooden platforms created living spaces that felt both rugged and elegant, and deeper inside, where darkness once swallowed everything, stood a carefully curated collection of maritime history. The crates were no longer hidden. They were displayed, protected, honored. What was once a desperate shelter had become something extraordinary. A home, a museum, a story waiting to be told. Harper stood quietly near the entrance one evening, watching the sun sink into the horizon. The golden light spilled across the ocean, reflecting into the cave in soft, shimmering waves. There was a time not long ago when she had nothing but fear in her chest. Now, she felt something else entirely. Peace. But it wasn't just the transformation of the cave that made this moment powerful. It was the transformation of her. Because the girl who once spent nights wondering if she would make it to the next morning was now standing in a place she had built with her own hands, a place no one believed in, a place no one wanted, a place the world had abandoned. And somehow, it became the very thing that saved her. Word began to spread slowly. At first, just whispers. A strange story about a young woman living in a cave, then curiosity, then attention. Historians reached out. Collectors, researchers, people who had spent their entire lives searching for pieces of the past, now standing in awe of what Harper had uncovered by accident and protected by choice. Offers came, big ones, life-changing amounts of money that could have taken her far away from the cliffs, far away from the cave, far away from everything that started this journey, and for a moment, she considered it. A clean break, a new life, an easier path. But then she looked around. At the walls she had cleaned with bleeding hands. At the floor she had cleared piece by piece. At the artifacts she had discovered when she had nothing left. And she realized something most people never understand. This was never just about the money. It was about meaning, about purpose, about finding something in the darkest moment of her life, and choosing to turn it into something beautiful. So she made a different decision. Instead of selling everything, she preserved it. She worked with experts not to give it away, but to tell its story properly, to honor the ship that never returned, to give history a voice that had been silent for over a century. And in doing so, she built something even more valuable than wealth. She built a legacy. Visitors began arriving, not in crowds at first, but in quiet, respectful numbers, each person stepping into the cave with curiosity and leaving with something deeper, inspiration, because the story they came for wasn't just about a lost ship. It was about a young woman who refused to be lost with it. One evening, as Harper guided a small group through the chamber, she paused beside the very first crate she had opened. The moment that changed everything. She ran her fingers lightly across the aged wood, her expression soft but certain. "I found this when I had nothing," she said quietly. The group listened closely, and I thought it was the discovery that saved me. She paused, then shook her head gently, but it wasn't. A small smile appeared on her face. "I saved me because I didn't walk away." Silence filled the space, but it wasn't empty. It was powerful, because everyone in that room understood this story wasn't just hers. It was a reminder that, sometimes, the moment you feel like you've reached the end is actually the beginning of something greater than you ever imagined. As the group slowly moved on, Harper stayed behind for a moment. Alone again, but not lonely. Not anymore. She looked around the cave one last time, the place that once held nothing but darkness, now filled with light, history, and life. And she whispered softly, almost like a promise, "Thank you for giving me a chance." But deep down, she knew the truth. The cave didn't give her that chance. She gave it to herself, and that is what changed everything. Sometimes, the most reckless decision you can make becomes the most powerful turning point of your life. When Harper Collins spent her last $10 on something everyone else ignored, it didn't look like courage, it looked like desperation. No guarantees, no safety, no clear outcome, just a blind step into the unknown. But here's the truth most people never realize. Life doesn't reward comfort. It rewards courage. The cave didn't change her life overnight. What changed everything was her willingness to walk into darkness when she had every reason to run away, to keep going when fear was louder than hope, to believe just enough that something better could exist on the other side of uncertainty. That's where real transformation begins. Not when things are safe, not when everything makes sense, but when you decide to take the step anyway, Because sometimes the opportunity that changes your life forever doesn't look like an opportunity at all. It looks like risk. It looks like fear. It looks like a decision no one else would understand. And that's exactly why it's meant for you. If this story moved you, subscribe for more. And if someone in your life needs hope, share this with them. Because sometimes, one decision changes everything.